Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need.
Hey guys, it's Igor and Ryan here for Project Uproar, here where we're committed to helping you get closer to your ideal self. Today we're talking about Stoicism and Stoic myths that misrepresent what Stoicism is actually about. We've noticed that a lot of the time people have these wrong beliefs about Stoicism, including our own friends. So we wanted to make this video to help just clear up some of these misunderstandings. Ryan, you want to get started?
Yeah, so the first myth we're going to talk about today is that Stoicism is a religion. In fact, Stoicism is not a religion. It may have been born in ancient Greece, might have been practiced by the Greeks and the Romans who practiced their own religions, but Stoicism was not considered a religion at the time, nor is it considered a religion now. Stoicism is a philosophy, or as many would consider it, a philosophy of life, and it is meant to be practiced, but also challenged. It doesn't have to be followed word for word like a religion. And in fact, you can be a religious person, like a Christian or a Muslim, and practice Stoicism, or you could be an atheist or an agnostic and practice Stoicism. It doesn't really matter about your faith. Stoicism is independent from religion.
And then there's the idea that I actually stumbled upon on a podcast a little while ago, which is that Stoicism is boring. So we often have wrong things associated with Stoicism. And you can even see this in the fact that Ryan Holiday, in his podcast, explains how he chose to create book titles like The Obstacle is the Way, because he knew that using the word Stoicism and Stoic wouldn't get much attention, right? People seem to just run away because it doesn't seem like an appealing topic. But in reality, Stoicism is very exciting, and we just have to look at the actual history of some of the most famous Stoics to see that. For example, Marcus Aurelius was a Stoic, and he was the emperor of Rome, the strongest power in the world at the time, right? He waged wars. He went through his sons dying. He went through insane things, insane pressure, insane level of stakes, and he managed to use Stoicism to guide him through it. And then there was Seneca, who was a successful statesman, writer, and vastly wealthy, and he was also the advisor to Emperor Nero. So these guys had insanely interesting lives, and Stoicism actually helped them through them. So as you can see, there is a very interesting history here, and we'll actually talk about some more recent examples as we go on.
The third myth we're going to talk about is that to be a Stoic, you have to not show emotion. This, in fact, is not true, contrary to popular opinion. I know myself, when I first learned about Stoicism, it was when I was in my third year of university, and my professor mentioned Stoicism wrongly, saying that this character portrayed Stoic qualities, meaning showed lack of emotions. And that was my understanding of Stoicism for many years. In fact, Stoicism does not mean you don't show any emotions in your day-to-day life. What Stoicism could actually help you do is manage your emotions. And in fact, many would argue the goal of Stoicism is for one to achieve a flourishing and happy life. Very contrary to the idea that one does not have any emotions.
Exactly. One of the main things that people try to criticize Stoicism about is the idea of repressing emotions, but you're not repressing it, you're actually dealing with it, usually in a healthy way, and actually moving through it, moving past it. Sometimes, yeah, you're going to feel down, but using Stoicism, using the techniques within Stoicism, you can get over it quicker. It's not about denying emotions. It's about either not experiencing negative emotions, or if you do experiencing it, moving it beyond it as fast as possible. And the Stoics are very much open to positive emotions, including joy and as well as laughter. Many Stoics would approve of laughing, unlike our usual stereotypical view of the expressionless Stoic. Number 4, because Stoicism values virtue and things we can control above the idea of materialistic things like wealth, some people think that Stoics are in general poor or don't care about money. This is not really the case. If you look at Seneca, the example I mentioned earlier, he was vastly wealthy. Obviously, Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, was wealthy as well. There was also people who had less money, like Epictetus, but he held his own school and he was probably doing well too. There are richer and poorer Stoics. Socrates, who a lot of the Stoics actually derive inspiration from, even though he wasn't a Stoic himself, because Stoicism came after that, he was pretty poor. But the idea is you don't need wealth to live the good life, to live happily, but there's nothing wrong as a Stoic with pursuing wealth as long as you don't get attached to the money. So as we see with Seneca, it is completely okay to move towards making money as long as you're doing it in a virtuous way and you are ready for it to perhaps leave your life, right? Because it doesn't belong to you, and you need to recognize that everything that isn't your virtue, everything that's not within your control, you're just borrowing and it can be taken back at any point.
The fifth myth we're going to talk about is that Stoicism is outdated or does not apply to contemporary society. In fact, Stoicism has seen a resurgence since the 1970s, and one of the main reasons for this is the rise of cognitive behavioral therapy. So this type of psychological therapy actually takes its roots from Stoicism, and many cognitive behavioral therapists today have credited Stoicism as a great building block for many of the practices done in cognitive behavioral therapy. As well, if you pick up Seneca's letters or Marcus Aurelius's reflections, you'll notice the text itself is pretty easy to read if you get a great translation, unlike an ancient text that may be very dense to read. So I would argue that many of the writing styles of these Stoics, especially if you get a great modern translation, are very easily approachable and very easy to adapt to one's own life.
100%. I actually told Ryan when I first read Seneca, his On the Shortness of Life, that it seems like something that was written yesterday. Like, obviously, there are certain aspects, like talking about going to the public showers, right? Public baths, that are different. But at the same time, it's insane how much everything you read within these Stoic books applies. Everything is useful and everything can be used right away. The other thing is you have Tim Ferriss, right? A vastly successful figure today. You might have heard of his 4-Hour Workweek book, which is also a great read, which you should check out. Then there's Ryan Holiday. Both use Stoicism unapologetically to help them live better lives. Often people say that Stoicism is the perfect philosophy for entrepreneurs because there's so much hecticness, there's so much pressure that can be put on you, it's unpredictable, and a lot of entrepreneurs turn to Stoicism and its practices to actually help them thrive within that kind of environment. Number 6 is the myth that Stoics are just thinkers and that they just philosophize, think about a monk meditating in a cave, not contributing to society. This is not the case. Although Stoics are philosophers, the philosophy is very practical. It's all about applying it. Marcus Aurelius says, no more think about what a good man should be one. And that's the idea behind Stoicism. It's all about applying it. It's not like in university sometimes where you learn all these different philosophies, but you don't actually apply it in real life. The Stoics would be against that. They're all about being practical, applying it, and that's why you see Stoics. And that's why you see Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, like Seneca, actually participating within society in the biggest ways that you can participate within society, right? Some teach schools, but some are also very much within society. Tim Ferriss very much participating within our modern society while using, as he says, Stoicism as his operating system. The idea is that Stoics aren't necessarily these guys with beards walking around the street just talking about stuff, especially not today. They can totally look like anyone else. Seneca is all about participating within society, from the outside perhaps not even being recognizable as a Stoic, but on the inside you're using all the philosophy to help you live with virtue and with happiness and tranquility.
The 7th myth is the idea that in order to be a Stoic, you have to be a masochist. This is completely untrue. The Stoics did put themselves through voluntary discomfort, which voluntary discomfort is the practice of going through something uncomfortable, whether it be a cold shower every day, whether it be fasting once a week, it could be training for a marathon, something that is not easy in order to build a strong outer shell and be able to cope with more harsh circumstances in the future. It's just the idea of practicing hardship in order to be ready for something even more hard that may come up down the road. Masochism is very different. It's the idea that one is purposely inflicting pain on themselves, sometimes to the extreme, in order for pleasurable results. This is not what the Stoics did. In fact, I haven't really met anyone who seeks pleasure in a cold shower. It's usually something that isn't the most comfortable thing, but they do it in order to be able to tackle some bigger obstacles later in the day, and for them to be able to feel like those obstacles aren't as big as they made them out to be.
Exactly. It's training your willpower muscles and building your discipline so that when situations come that are difficult to deal with, you can step up and deal with them while maintaining your tranquility. For example, Seneca practiced poverty. He suggested taking a few days within the month and practicing poverty, eating cheap food, dressing in cheap clothes, and not spending a lot of money. The idea here is, yes, to build discipline, but also to prepare for one day when, you could have less money than you do now. You never know what can happen. So that way you take the sting out of that fear because you're like, oh, is this all I feared? This isn't so bad. And at the same time, if it ever does happen, then you're more prepared for how to deal with it. You've dealt with it in smaller quantities like a vaccine before, right? So that's the idea. It's never going too far, never hurting yourself, but stuff like maybe not wearing a jacket when it's a bit colder out so that you can toughen up. And it can be physical, like with marathon running, but there's always this mental component where you're building your mental strength. Number 8 is that Stoics are fatalists, which pretty much means there's no reason to even try because everything it turns out in a specific way. No matter what we try to do, you can't fight destiny, so there's no point. That's not what Stoicism is. Some people would think that because there's the idea in Stoicism that you can't control certain things and you should just accept them. But that is only once you use knowledge, wisdom, to realize that something is not within your control. There are stuff that are within our control, and Stoicism is always talking about that. It's talking about virtue, becoming the best version of yourself. That stuff is within our control, as well as trying our best. That's within our control. What's not within our control is often the outcome. So like the idea of my goal is this year to make a certain amount of money. Something could happen that could get in the way of that. So Stoics always say, my goal is to try to make a certain amount of money if nothing prevents me, right? There's always that one little thing, God willing, that they add because you never know what could happen. I mean, we could just be walking outside and God forbid get hit by a car and that's the end, right? So you never know what could happen, and Stoics allow for that, so that takes out that unnecessary stress. But very much, they're always trying their best to be the best versions of themselves, and they definitely believe that there's more value in living virtuously, which is the only real good, than living with vice, which is the only bad. Right? Everything else are preferred and dispreferred indifference.
Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this video. We want you to subscribe and like if you did enjoy it. And if you have any other Stoic myths that you've either heard or that you have yourself, feel free to drop them in the comment section. We'd love to have a conversation with you.
And let us know what you think about Stoicism itself in the comments. We're definitely big fans of the philosophy, and we're going to do much more videos about Stoicism as well. We're also going to run this workshop that we can put the picture on here, the poster, and put some information about it in the description below. That's it for this one. I'm super excited about the next one. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time.